Many councils are wondering about the purpose of cultural institutions in an age of information. Many libraries are facing questions over the future of their service. The situation is similar across the arts institutions as they face the reality of 30% cuts to Arts Council budgets and a 16% reduction in local authority spending by March 2013 on arts and culture compared with 2009 to 2010. Although this figure summarises the overall spending reductions, the actual figure varies by council. Somerset County Council, for example, has cut its arts provision by 100%. It has been announced that the Department for Culture, Media and Sport is to face cuts of £12 million in 2013 to 2014 and then £22 million in 2014 to 2015. The Department for Culture, Media and Sport will be required to cut both itself and the organisations that it gives money to, for example Arts Council England and National Museums. Arts Council England has already cut its administration costs by 50%, and so it is currently unclear to what level it will be able to apply any cuts internally or if arts organisations will shoulder the majority of the burden. British art funding is not a level playing field. London receives many times that given to the regions. Big institutions are getting funding that is multiple times that given to grassroots. Recently, Danny Boyle accused Maria Miller, Culture Secretary, of showing a lack of attention to the arts, branding it outrageous and saying, "It's a disgrace. It is artistic directors that are spending taxpayers' money. And she's not met them. They are the people spending the money. She should be talking to them." Boyle spoke following a meeting called to argue the claims of English regional theatres as pressure on funding increases. It was attended by Boyle, Nicholas Hartner, Director of the National Theatre, and 23 regional theatre directors. Questions have been raised over the ability of fundraising by arts organisations in poorer areas outside London. Where are the super rich of Bolton, for example, was the argument presented by Nicholas Hartner. There are many concerns around ghost productions that will never emerge simply because those who might have created them never got access to the theatre in the first place. Brian McMaster carried out an inquiry into arts funding and excellence. As part of his research, he attended an Arts Council meeting and asked every person in attendance how they became involved in the arts. Everyone, all leaders in the arts world, had the same answer: through participation. This proves that many larger organisations have their priorities wrong. When one member of the board of a fashionable London theatre stated that any cut to their budget would mean a cut to their educational work. We should be putting money into the bottom of the theatre hierarchical pyramid, argues theatre critic Lynn Gardner. It is only by funding the bottom that we can create the future. Education, community and participatory work should not be an add-on. It should be held at the heart of every arts organisation. A fundamental rethink is required in order to make that idea a reality. We cannot afford to only talk about it.
Since March 2011, photography organisations in England have been struggling due to the cuts in funding. These organisations have had to make tough choices to be able to continually maintain the scheduled exhibitions and cultural events. Side Gallery in Newcastle are one of the many institutions that have had their funding cut completely. They say that they have had to implement several strategies in order to survive. Graham Rigby of Side Gallery says, "The collective operates on the basis of an egalitarian wage. It's not high, but we can always agree to the percentage cuts or paying ourselves for fewer of the days we work. Both methods have been adapted over the last year and a half. By curating exhibitions from the archive, even though it means creating more time to develop the new work, it saves money so they don't have to pay themselves for it." According to Rigby, although Side have been supported by multiple funding sources, they are finding it difficult to fill the void created by the Arts Council. Four Corners Film, based in London's East End, has lost the £52,000 per year funding it used to receive. However, they have managed to obtain an amount of £50,000 to fund a pilot artist residency programme for 3 artists. Still, this funding has proved difficult as they still have to find a substantial amount to run the organisation. Four Corners, much like Side Gallery, are trying to tackle the issues of the lack of funding by developing its own revenues, using their own facilities and equipment and renting them out to outside companies. Even though the interest in photography has hugely expanded over the years, the arts funders are not recognising this. Photography as an art form is in need of a higher profile, so it can be recognised as art in its own right. The Contemporary Art Gallery Pavilion also lost £50,000 a year in Arts Council England's funding. According to the director, Jill Park, it produced an atmosphere of instability within the organisation. She says, "We have project-led structure that is great and we're able to do what we want to do, in the sense that we've been able to continue to do what we care about. We don't have the same security as a 3-year funding contract, but I don't think anybody has much security in the arts at the moment." Employees from the Hereford Photography Festival had to cancel the festival in 2012 as a result of the cuts. Many employees were made redundant, and they also didn't have the funds to even pay the management team. In the short term, they are finding it hard to justify delivering these projects, but they are hopeful that in the long term, the situation will change. This organisation operates as a charity, and they are hopeful that if the funding is found, then the festival will be reinstated. Despite the cuts, Arts Council England is aiming to support art organisations the best they can.
Eurocon, the video game software developer, has officially announced they have gone into administration. This comes just months after video gaming publisher Activision released the news that they were having to make huge cuts due to less game sales and decided not to renew their contracts with smaller development houses like Eurocom, instead using big companies such as EA Games. Eurocom, who is responsible for hugely successful games like Call of Duty Black Ops, have stated that because of the current climate, people are spending less on video games and resorting to video piracy as they just don't have the money. They also said that they are unable to compete with the low costings of large games corporations, so are unable to tie up new contracts for next year and have now ceased to trade, with 250 people losing their jobs. With the constant drop in game sales each year, publishing companies like Activision have made cuts within their development houses and recently released the news that they are having to resort to a new strategy next year, which means seeing a lot less Activision games being released. This in turn means we are seeing more independent companies close down as they cannot secure the work. With the new tax relief announced yesterday for the UK gaming industry and George Osborne intending to spend £15 million in the first year and £35 million in the year after, it looks to be a very different story for UK, as things are looking up for independent British games producers. Since the tax breaks, there have been a huge number of companies closing down, but at the same time, lots of new startups, which is a real positive, and with the new tax relief, these companies look to thrive. Introversion director Mark Morris says making video games is really risky and firms just seem to have a natural shelf life, irrespective of the climate that they are operating in. But there is usually someone to step up and become the next big thing. Mobile Pie creative director Will Lutton comments, "We shouldn't be focusing on big global games, but instead we should look at what's happening in smaller, digitally distributed companies doing new and exciting things." For UK companies to qualify for the tax relief, they must first pass a cultural test, which means they will have to culturally be British in order to receive the 25% tax relief. As long as this money filters down into the smaller indie companies, it will be a huge help in raising the video game economy, although it may also end up being restrictive and counterproductive, as many games will not fit into these categories. We may see creative boundaries forming, especially for the smaller, innovative developers who are notorious for being experimental, conforming to more mainstream productions just to qualify, where the money could be spent on developing more content.